HOA patrol officer climbed my ranch fence. Grandpa electrified it and sent him flying into the creek. The sun dipped low over the rolling hills of Willow Creek Ranch, casting an amber haze that made the barbed wire fence glint like a warning. Somewhere in the distance, a hawk screeched, as if it knew trouble was slithering closer. My name's Lila Carson, and at 24, I thought moving back to Grandpa Wyatt's ranch in Montana would be a quiet retreat from city life. The ranch was 120 acres of freedom golden fields, a creaky barn, and a burbling creek that cut through the property like a lifeline. Grandpa, a wiry 79-year-old with a twinkle in his eye and a fuse shorter than a firecracker, ran the place like a fortress. He'd always said, "This land's ours, Lila. Ain't no busybody gonna tell us how to live." I didn't know how much he meant it until Officer Gary Hensley, the HOA's self-appointed sheriff, came knocking. Our troubles started a month ago when the Willow Creek Homeowners Association, a glorified clique of suburban transplants, decided our ranch was an eyesore. They'd annexed the outskirts of town, claiming jurisdiction over properties like ours. Their complaints were laughable. Our barn's paint was non-compliant. Our chickens roamed too freely, and our fencing apparently was an affront to community standards. Grandpa laughed it off at first, tossing their letters into the wood stove. HOA, he'd cackle. Bunch of Karens in khakis. But when Officer Hensley, a wiry man with a clipboard and a permanent sneer, started patrolling our property line, Grandpa's grin turned to steel. Hensley was the kind of guy who'd fine you for a blade of grass out of place. He'd drive by in his golf cart, snapping photos of our violations like a paparazzo chasing scandal. One day, he left a citation taped to our mailbox, $500 for unapproved livestock. That was the last straw for Grandpa. "Lila," he said, eyes glinting, "this fella's about to learn what happens when you poke a bear." Grandpa's plan was simple but diabolical. Years ago, he'd rigged an electric current through the fence to keep coyotes out. It wasn't lethal just enough to make you regret touching it. He'd disconnected it when I moved in, worried I'd zap myself feeding the horses. Now, he dusted off the generator in the barn, humming an old cowboy tune as he rewired the system. "If that HOA Karen climbs my fence," he said, "he's gonna dance like a June bug on a hot skillet." I should have stopped him. I knew it was reckless, maybe even illegal. But part of meth, part tired of Hensley's smug notes and entitled glares, wanted to see him get a taste of his own medicine. So I kept quiet, tending to the chickens while Grandpa worked his mischief. The tension built over days. Hensley's patrols grew bolder. He'd park his cart at the edge of our property, scribbling furiously, sometimes shouting over the fence about ordinances. Grandpa would just wave, a Cheshire cat grin on his face, knowing the trap was set. I started losing sleep, half expecting Hensley to storm the ranch with a lawyer in tow. But Grandpa was calm as a summer pond. "Patience, Lila," he'd say. "Karens always overstep." The explosion came on a muggy Friday evening. I was on the porch, sipping sweet tea, when I heard the golf carts whine. Hensley was back, this time with a ladder propped against our fence. My heart lurched. He was actually going to climb it. I bolted upright, ready to warn Grandpa, but he was already at the barn, flipping the generator switch with a grin that could have lit the county. Hensley, in his starched khakis and HOA badge, scaled the ladder like a man on a mission. He was muttering something about trespass enforcement when his hand gripped the top wire. The air crackled. His body jolted, arms flailing like a rag doll, and with a yelp that echoed across the valley, he flew backward, tumbling into the creek below. The splash was spectacular, water sprayed 10 feet high, his clipboard sinking like a stone. I froze, torn between horror and laughter. Grandpa hooped from the barn, slapping his knee. "Told you he'd dance," he hollered. But my stomach churned. Hensley was thrashing in the shallow creek, soaked and sputtering, his pride more bruised than his body. I ran to the fence, expecting him to scream threats or call the cops. Instead, he scrambled out, slipped on the muddy bank, and fell face first into the muck. That's when I noticed a figure in the distance, a teenage boy on a bike, filming the whole thing with his phone, laughing so hard he nearly fell over. Hensley staggered to his cart, dripping and defeated, and peeled out without a word. Grandpa was still cackling when I turned to him. "You're gonna get us sued," I said, half serious. He just winked. "Let him try. Ain't no court gonna side with a fence-climbin' Karen." The next morning, the video was everywhere. The kid, who turned out to be Tommy Ruiz, a neighbor's son with a knack for trouble, had posted it on X with the caption, HOA Karen vs. Electric Fence, Round 1. It had thousands of likes by noon. People called Hensley Creek Karen and memed his flailing arms into GIFs. I couldn't help but laugh, but dread gnawed at me. This wasn't over. Sure enough, Hensley came back Monday with a sheriff's deputy and a lawyer in a cheap suit. The deputy, a grizzled man named Roy, listened to Hensley's rant about assault and booby traps. Grandpa, cool as ever, admitted to electrifying the fence but claimed it was for livestock protection. Officer Hensley trespassed, he said. Ain't my fault he can't read a no-entry sign. Roy scratched his chin, clearly amused. The lawyer blustered about lawsuits, but Roy cut him off. Gary, you climbed a private fence. What did you expect a welcome mat? He warned Grandpa to disconnect the fence, but left without charges. Hensley's face was purple with rage. As they drove off, he yelled, This isn't over, Wyatt. The victory felt sweet, but I knew Hensley wouldn't quit. He was a man obsessed, the kind who'd burn the world to win a point. The X-posts kept coming, some cheering Grandpa, others egging Hensley on. Tommy's videos turned him into a local legend, but they also painted a target on our backs. I started noticing strange things, a drone buzzing over the ranch at dusk, tire tracks near the creek that didn't match Hensley's cart. Someone was watching. Then came the second twist, the one that turned my amusement to ice. One evening, while checking the mailbox, I found an unmarked envelope. Inside was a grainy photo of Grandpa at the fence, wiring the generator, with a note in block letters. I saw everything. Pay up or the sheriff gets this. My blood ran cold. Someone hadn't just been watching, they'd been waiting, ready to turn our prank into a crime. I showed Grandpa the note, expecting him to scoff. Instead, his face hardened. Lilas, we've got a snake in our boots, he said. We didn't know who sent it, Hensley, maybe, or someone else riding the viral wave, but it meant trouble. The ranch, our home, was no longer a game board for petty feuds. It was a siege. The next week was a blur. Hensley doubled down, filing a civil suit for intentional harm and demanding $100,000. The lawyer's letters were relentless, each one thicker than the last. Meanwhile, the blackmailer struck again, leaving another note under a rock near the gate. $50K cash. Creek bed. Friday. Grandpa wanted to set another trap, but I begged him to hold off. We're in over our heads, I said. He just patted his old rifle, muttering about carnivores and critters. Tommy, who'd become an unlikely ally, offered to stake out the creek with his bike and camera. I owe you guys, he said, grinning. That video got me 1,000 followers. I didn't want to involve a kid, but his stubborn streak matched Grandpa's, and we needed eyes. So we agreed to hide in the brush and film whoever came for the drop. Friday night, under a moonless sky, I left a decoy bag of newspaper scraps by the creek, my heart hammering. Grandpa watched from the barn with binoculars, while Tommy crouched in the bushes, his phone ready. The air was thick with anticipation, the ranch holding its breath. At midnight, a figure emerged, not Hensley, but Clara Henshaw, Gary's wife, a mousy woman who'd seen at HOA meetings but never heard speak. She grabbed the bag, her hands shaking, and whispered, I'm sorry, I didn't want this. Then she froze, spotting Tommy's lens glinting in the dark. Tommy, shouted, she screamed, dropping her the bag. I didn't mean. Before she could finish, Grandpa's voice boomed from the barn. Clara Henshaw, you picked the wrong ranch. She bolted, tripping over roots, her sobs echoing as she vanished into the night. Tommy's footage was gold clear as day, days showing her face, the bag, her confession. But it raised more questions than answers. Was she the blackmailer? Or was she another victim of Hensley's obsession? The next day, I took the video to Sheriff Roy. He watched it in silence, then sighed. Clara's been under Gary's thumb for years, he said. Probably thought she had no choice. He called Clara in, and she spilled everything. Gary had forced her to send the notes, hoping to scare us into selling the ranch. He'd planned to ruin us financially, then buy the land for a gated community deal he'd struck with developers. The lawsuit, the drone, the HOA's sudden interest, it was all a setup. Roy arrested Gary that afternoon. The suit was dropped, and the HOA board, humiliated by the scandal, dissolved their patrol. Clara, free from Gary's control, moved in with her sister, leaving a tearful thank you note at our gate. The ex exploded with the news, dubbing Grandpa Fencebreaker Wyatt and Tommy Kid Colfax after an old outlaw. The ranch felt like ours again, but the victory was bittersweet. I thought that was the end, but Grandpa had one last surprise. A week later, he showed me a deed he'd kept secret. Years ago, he'd bought a small plot in town, now worth a fortune. Was gonna give it to you, he said, eyes twinkling. But I'm thinking we'll donate it for a park. Let this town remember who stood up to Karens. As we sat on in the porch, watching the sunset, I realized the real cost of our fight. The ranch wasn't just land, it was defiance, family, a legacy. Hensley's fall was funny, but Grandpa's stand was epic. The creek burbled below, as if laughing along, and for the first time in months, I felt like we'd won more than a feud. We'd won home. The dust hadn't settled on Willow Creek Ranch, even after Gary Hensley's arrest. The air still carried a charge, like the electric hum of Grandpa's fence before it sent that HOA tyrant soaring into the creek. I thought we'd won, that the ranch was safe, but life has a way of throwing curveballs when you're dusting off your boots. The morning after Hensley's downfall, I woke to the smell of Grandpa's coffee and the sound of his whistling an old tune about outlaws and open plains. He was in high spirits, already planning to reinforce the fence with a few extra volts for good measure. I rolled my eyes but couldn't hide my grin. We're done with traps, Grandpa, I said, pouring a mug. Let's not tempt fate. He just winked, like he knew fate was an old friend he could outsmart. The ex-posts about Creek Karen were still rolling in, some hailing Grandpa as a folk hero, others debating whether we'd gone too far. Tommy Ruiz, our teenage videographer, was basking in his newfound fame, his follower count climbing faster than Hensley's ladder. He stopped by that afternoon, his bike skidding to a stop by the porch. "You see the new meme?" he asked, shoving his phone under my nose. It was a cartoon of Hensley mid-zap, with Grandpa's face photoshopped onto a lightning bolt. I laughed, but the knot in my stomach tightened. The world was watching, and not everyone was on our side. That's when the third twist hit, the one that made me question everything. A woman showed up at our gate, unannounced, driving a beat-up sedan that looked out of place among the ranch's dusty trails. She was in her 50s, with graying hair pulled into a tight bun and eyes that carried a quiet weight. "I'm Ellen Carver," she said, her voice steady but soft. "Gary Hensley's sister." My heart sank. I braced for a tirade, expecting her to threaten lawsuits or worse. Instead, she asked to talk alone. Grandpa was out checking the horses, so I led her to the porch, my nerves jangling like spurs. Ellen sat stiffly, clutching a worn purse, and started talking. "Gary wasn't always like this," she said. "He was a good kid once, before life chewed him up." She told me about their childhood hardscrabble, with a father who ruled by fear. Gary had escaped to the military, then drifted into jobs where he could wield control, like the HOA patrol. "He thought power made him safe," she said, her voice cracking. "But it just made him mean." I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to snap that Hensley's past didn't excuse his vendetta against us, but Ellen's eyes held a pain I couldn't ignore. Then she dropped the bombshell. "Clara called me last night," she said. "She's leaving town for good, but she told me something you need to know. Gary didn't act alone." My pulse quickened. The developer Dell had a partner on the HOA board, someone who stood to make millions if your ranch sold. I stared, my mind racing. The drone, the tire tracks, the blackmail notes. Had there been another player all along? Ellen didn't know the partner's name, only that Clara had overheard Gary talking about splitting the profits. She'd come to warn us, not out of loyalty to her brother, but because she thought we deserved the truth. "I'm sorry for what he did," she said, standing to leave. "I just hope you can move on." Her words haunted me. Move on. The ranch was our home, but it felt like a battlefield now, scarred by Hensley's schemes and this new, faceless threat. I told Grandpa everything that evening, expecting him to grab his rifle and declare war. Instead, he sat quiet, his weathered hands folded. "Lila," he said finally, "sometimes you gotta let the snakes slither away. We've got the land, the horses, each other. That's enough." But it wasn't enough for me. I couldn't shake the feeling that the HOA's shadow still loomed. I started digging, scouring X for mentions of the developer deal, cross-referencing HOA board members with local real estate records. Tommy helped, his knack for digital sleuthing proving sharper than I'd expected. "You're like a cowboy hacker," I teased. He grinned. "Call me Cyber Colfax." Our search led us to Marjorie Klein, the HOA's treasurer, a woman with a smile like a used car salesman and a history of shady land deals. Her name popped up in a buried X thread about a failed condo project, linked to the same developer Hensley had courted. It wasn't proof, but it was a thread to pull. I wanted to confront her, but Grandpa urged caution. "She's a cornered rattler," he said. "Let's watch her first." So we watched. Tommy rigged a cheap trail camera near the ranch's edge, hidden in a tree. For days, nothing, just deer and the occasional coyote. Then, late one night, the camera caught Marjorie's SUV idling by the creek, her face lit by her phone as she typed furiously. The next morning, a new citation appeared in our mailbox: $10,000 for environmental damage to the creek, citing Hensley's fall as evidence. It was absurd, but the message was clear: she was picking up where Gary left off. I was furious, ready to storm the HOA office, but Grandpa had other ideas. "Let's give her a taste of her own game," he said, his eyes glinting. His plan was pure Wyatt. We'd host a ranch open house, inviting the whole town to see the eyesore for themselves. "Show him the truth," he said. "Let Marjorie explain why a creek's worth 10 grand. The open house was set for Saturday. We spent the week sprucing up, painting the barn, grooming the horses, even baking pies from Grandma's old recipe. Tommy spread the word on X, hyping it as Willow Creek's Reckoning. Round 2. By Friday, RSVPs were pouring in, from neighbors to strangers who'd followed the saga online. I was nervous, but Grandpa was in his element, strutting like a rooster. "Truth's a better weapon than any fence," he said. Saturday dawned clear and crisp, the ranch glowing under a Montana sky. Cars lined the drive by noon, folks spilling out with kids, dogs, and picnic blankets. We gave tours, let kids ride the ponies, and served pie while Grandpa spun tales of the ranch's history. The creek sparkled, no trace of damage to be seen. People whispered about Hensley, some laughing, others shaking their heads. The X livestream Tommy set up racked up views, with comments like, "This place is paradise," and HOA's full of it. Marjorie showed up an hour in, uninvited, her smile tight as a drum. She cornered me by the barn, waving the citation. "This stunt won't change anything," she hissed. "You'll pay, or we'll seize the land." I kept my cool, channeling Grandpa's calm. "Take a look around, Marjorie. See any damage?" The crowd was watching now, phones out, sensing a showdown. She faltered, her eyes darting. That's when Tommy struck. He'd edited a montage of his trail cam footage, showing Marjorie's late-night visits and the pristine creek. He projected it onto the barn wall, the crowd gasping as her SUV appeared again and again. "What's this about environmental damage?" he called, his voice carrying. Marjorie's face drained of color. She stammered, then bolted for her car, the crowd jeering as she sped off. The open house was a triumph. By sundown, the citation was a joke, and the X hashtag Ranch Reckoning was trending. Sheriff Roy stopped by, tipping his hat. "Marjorie's got some explaining to do," he said. "I'll be paying her a visit." I felt lighter than I had in months, like the ranch was finally ours again. But the story didn't end there. A week later, Marjorie resigned from the HOA, citing personal reasons. Rumors swirled about her ties to the developer, and an X post from an anonymous whistleblower leaked emails showing she'd pushed the annexation to target our land. The HOA dissolved entirely, its members slinking away in shame. The ranch was safe, but the cost lingered: sleepless nights, legal fees, the weight of Ellen's words about Hensley's broken past. Grandpa's park idea became reality. We donated the town plot, and by spring, it was a green space with swings and a plaque, "Wyatt Stand, for Freedom and Family." At the opening, Tommy gave a speech, his usual smirk gone. "This ranch taught me something," he said. "You don't mess with people's homes. And you don't mess with Wyatt Carson." The crowd cheered, and I saw Grandpa wipe his eye, blaming damn dust. As for me, I stayed on the ranch, trading city dreams for open skies. Hensley's fall was a spectacle, but the real story was us: Grandpa's defiance, Tommy's loyalty, even Ellen's courage. The creek still burbled, the fence stood tall, and the ranch felt alive, its scars a badge of survival. Looking back, I wonder where the line is between justice and revenge, standing up and striking back. Hensley and Marjorie got what they deserved, but at what cost? Their lives unraveled, while we rebuilt. Was it fair? I don't know. But I know this. The ranch is ours, and no Karen will ever climb our fence again. What do you think? Was our fight righteous, or did we go too far? Share your thoughts below, and let's talk about where justice ends and vengeance begins.